everybody loves Charles Oliveira, right? Unless you are some professional hater hating on everyone for absolutely no reason, I think we would all agree he's a decent man as far as UFC fighters go, you know? Before I start talking about Ilia Topuria, I'm thinking I should tell you a thing or two regarding Charles the Bronx first. Of course, he has this insane submission threat as well as some quite good hands. I don't wanna just read out stats to you this whole video, yet I wanna make it clear. Charles isn't just some bum, alright? He has what, 21 submissions in the UFC? By far the most, by the way. He also has 10 knockouts, which is quite respectable, I would say, at least if we were comparing him to a normal human being. So we have a tiny problem regarding what I just said, cause Ilia Topuria clearly is no normal person. You see, I believe Charles is an amazing fighter, and that is exactly the reason why it's such a big shame just how doomed he is against Ilia. I know MMA math doesn't exactly work, at least not every single time, but hear me out for a second. If we set all the emotional stuff aside and just focus on Ilia's and Oliveira's most recent fights, the difference between the level of competition, how they lost or won against them, we can easily say the contrast is like night and day. Even that is putting it lightly, to be honest. Yes, I want the Charles Oliveira who won and defended the lightweight belt to show up to this fight like almost everyone does. However, I can't just forget how shaky he looked against Michael Chandler at some points in his last fight. It's not just that, but also how he lost to Arman and to Makachev. Yeah, I mean, those aren't names you should be ashamed for losing to. Still, aside from the Irish victory, I don't think Charles has looked incredibly impressive for a while now. Here's the deal, alright? The Makachev loss was so one-sided, though I have to admit the first round against Arman was very close, and I really wish Charles got it done there. Regardless of any of this, his losses aren't even the biggest problem, not even close. If I have to be honest, I know it's going to hurt a lot of people, including me, yet the fact that Charles almost always gets rocked in his fights really doesn't help his case, especially when he's set to face someone like Ilia Topuria of all people. Come on. Topuria is on such a run, if he wins this fight, and I unfortunately think he will easily, there will be a legitimate argument for it being the greatest 3-fight win streak ever. Let's do a little recap on Topuria. In early 2024, he knocked out Volk clean. Some people write that off now as if it was given, but I wanna remind you, that wasn't the case at all. Volkanovski was actually a favorite against Topuria. I love Volk, right? Yet I have to say, that feels kind of crazy to look back on. What were we thinking, as Volk was coming off on a short turnaround after being destroyed by Makachev? Anyway, as if Ilia's way of winning the belt wasn't insane enough, he also finished Max Holloway in spectacular fashion at his one and only title defense. Yeah, him moving up and not fighting some of the other contenders in the division is less than ideal, but I would say it's understandable considering the circumstances, don't you think? Like I said before, as much as I want to think Charles who knocked out Michael Chandler, Charles who submitted both Dustin and Justin, is going to be the one showing up to this fight against Ilia, I sadly know better than that. When you take a look at this fight realistically, the only way for Charles to pull off a win is to take drastic risks. I don't like that, okay? Not against Ilia. Considering how crafty Charles can be on the ground with his submissions and his underrated stand-up skills, it may sound like not that big of a long shot, however, I'm telling you, it is a long shot. Because his opponent isn't the kind of guy you wanna take any risk against, especially on the feet. That leaves the ground game open, I know. Still, it's not like Charles is a full-on wrestler or anything like that. He's a submission threat on the ground for sure, yet I don't see him taking Ilia down in a million years, to be honest. We have to recognize, no matter how hard it is to admit, but Topuria isn't some boxer with no ground game. I understand it's easy to make this assumption when you see the guy knock out people cold with such ease. At the same time though, his wrestling and BJJ background is quite solid, with him having 8 submission wins in total, even though most of it was against questionable opposition early in his career. So here's what I'm getting at. This is a very hard fight for Charles to win, even if he was in his prime. The fact that he is much older now, along with how he seems to be slowing down at least a bit as we saw in his last fight, does not really help either, of course. I know some Oliveira fans are going to disagree with me heavily, but I'll still say it. I truly don't think Charles is at the top of his game right now. Mostly because of his age, so it's understandable. Don't get me wrong, I can see Topuria maybe having some struggles with his movement and speed early in the fight, because he just went up a weight class, you know? From there though, he'll just take over, hurt Charles bad, like he has been hurt many times before by the likes of Dustin, Justin or Makachev. This time I reckon it will be most likely a flat out KO, like I can just see it in my head right now. Topuria knocking Charles down, maybe doing like 1 or 2 follow-up punch max before the ref calls it. If that's how it goes, Oliveira won't even have the chance to pull off a crazy submission there. I know I may sound a bit too confident in my pick, but the great thing about this fight is, even if I'm wrong, I'm not really losing anything. Cause believe me, I would love to see Drew Bronx win, okay? If you disagree with me, please let me know, that's literally why I make these videos. Of course it goes without saying, but you need to be at least somewhat civil if possible, okay? Seriously Seriously though, I just like talking about upcoming fights I'm excited for, whether if I'm wrong or right doesn't really matter. Just as a small note though, I've been completely right so far with all my predictions on this channel, and if I'm going to get something wrong, which I will eventually, I would rather have it be this one, I'm not even kidding. Anyway guys, thanks for tuning in, don't forget to subscribe if you wanna hear more MMA takes from me, and I hope to see you the next time. Cheers!